Hospital pharmacists are vital members of the healthcare team whose roles continue to expand both behind the scenes and face-to-face with patients. If you're in the hospital, you should consider the hospital pharmacist as a knowledgeable and accessible source of important information. Bob Bepko, a pharmacist and a frequent guest on Health Talk, will discuss the expandable role of the hospital pharmacist and how that's important to you as a patient. So stay tuned, we're up next. Hello, I'm Dr. Eric Mazur. Today we're going to talk about the role of the hospital pharmacist and how that affects you as a patient. I'm joined by a frequent guest and favorite Health Talk guest, Bob Bepko. Bob is the Administrative Director of Pharmacy Services for Nuvance Health. Can't keep up with all your new titles, Bob.
Good afternoon.
Thanks for joining me. It's so good to have you. Bob is a good friend of mine and somebody who is always a great guest on Health Talk. So, I mean, your role has changed even since I worked here with you, but tell us, pick out something. Start and tell us, well, how's the role of the pharmacist? I used to think you go to the drugstore and you hand a prescription to somebody who takes some pills out of a jar, puts them in the jar and gives them to you and says, see you in a month.
Exactly.
So tell us, that's not your role anymore.
No. The profession has evolved dramatically over the years. It's now a 6-year formal education training. When the student does
you get a doctor of pharmacy?
You get a doctorate you get a PharmD degree.
Okay.
After the 6 years. And now the majority of the class graduates are all seeking postgraduate education in the hospital setting in residency programs.
Really? I didn't know that.
We currently, and unfortunately, there's only about, there's not enough residency programs to take into account all these new grads. We're very fortunate here on the Norwalk campus. We have an accredited American Society Health System pharmacist residency program. We have 2 residents a year. And it's a very demanding postgraduate
What do they
education.
focus on? They must have a focus for their residency.
They come up with a major project for their residency. They rotate through all of the service lines and participating with the physicians and the advanced practitioners and the nursing staff with improving the care of the patients.
So this is sort of focuses on inpatient pharmacy.
Well,
management,
it's inpatient, it's outpatient, it's management that they rotate through these different pods, as you can say, during their 2 years of residency. And so we have pharmacists all over. On the campuses. Most people wouldn't think, why would you have a pharmacist in the emergency room? Well, they're in there coordinating the medication reconciliation process with when patients come in, what meds are you taking? Because most of the time, people cannot verbalize what they're on. Their significant other a lot of times have no idea. So the pharmacist,
and we have something in the medical record that we think they're taking.
We think,
but we know that the chances of that matching up exactly are fairly slim.
And then oftentimes what we end up doing is calling their local drugstore to get what kind of medications that they're on, allergies and things like that.
Which is, I just point out, that's a lot of work.
It is.
That's a lot of work.
Listen, nobody, even the folks that work for me, I should say work with me. We had no idea how time-consuming this was going to be. And
a lot of people may think you just click a button and their medical records are available everywhere.
It doesn't work.
Medical records in this country, even if they're electronic, are very local and don't talk well to each other at all.
Listen, I agree with you 100%. That's the way it is. So we have pharmacists in the emergency rooms. We have pharmacists, of course, rotating on the floors with the medical staffs going through the team care process, taking care of patients. But also what they're doing is that before a patient is discharged, they will sit with that patient and a family member. A pharmacist will, and explain their medications to them. The new ones, how important it is, why you're taking these, and how critical it is, and to fill these prescriptions, and you have to take them.
Now, someone might say, well, that really, the doctor should be doing that. But I think it's probably the pharmacist will do a better job at it than the doctors will. Well, you want to tell us why?
Well, drug therapy has evolved into such a broad expansion. There's so many drugs out there with different indications, and not one person has all the answers anymore.
Yeah, I want to say, just I have the perspective of having graduated medical school 40 years ago, 45 years ago, 40 years ago. It's striking. It's like when I think back to what we were doing back then, it was like the Dark Ages.
Yes.
We had, half a dozen antibiotics. We had no cholesterol medicines except maybe niacin. We had, one or two blood pressure medicines. Almost none, the whole armamentarium was maybe a dozen medicines. And now we're talking about hundreds, thousands.
Exactly.
And they changed literally by the day as new stuff gets approved.
It's very difficult to keep up.
It's extraordinary.
So we have pharmacists in those roles, and also we have pharmacists that work with specific, like the cancer service line. And so we have a pharmacist that meets with each patient, their family members, when they come on board for treatment. They'll explain everything to them, what these meds are going to do, what you should look out for. And they work very collaboratively with the oncologist to help guide that therapy. There seems like all the cancer drugs that are out there now, it's not like I say when I was in my youth that there was only perhaps a half a dozen, 10 different oncology products. Now there's so many MABs, and I use that term, the MAB at the end, exactly, that are out there. Plus, so you have all that. You have the new biosimilars that are coming on the market that are replacing the original innovator drugs to use them on patients to help control costs because they do the same thing. And we even have, this particular pharmacist has a collaborative practice agreement with the oncologist that there's certain drugs that he can modify doses for, like nausea and vomiting, pain meds and things like that. So that particular role has been established. We're looking to bring 2 more people on board, and it's been great for the care of the patients, and it takes a big burden off the physicians.
Well, Bob, I think you're alluding to a major change in the way we practice medicine today.
Absolutely. It's a team approach.
That's what I was going to say. The idea of Marcus Welby, or back when who did everything, who knew everything, could do everything. I think it's a very laudable style of practice for that time. But the practice of medicine has become so complicated that, everybody is being pushed to the limits of their time and knowledge, that I think the only way to do this and serve the patient well is a team.
Yes.
So, they're embedding sociologists and psychologists in primary care practices, having the pharmacists play a role, having nurses play a role. So the physician isn't expected to do it all, because they can't.
Right.
They can't do it well. And so I think it's really good for patients, but hopefully patients understand that the complexity of medicine has dictated a whole new style of practice.
It's the ability, lifespans have grown with people, and a lot of it's got to do with the way medicine is practiced. Like you say, it's not a Marcus Welby approach, which was fine for that time. But now there's so much knowledge, there's so many ways to do things, that you got to have a team.
Now, I've even noticed that, again, when I was young and early on in my medical career, the expectation was that we carry around all the information that we needed to practice in our head. And I think that has really, the amount of information has outstripped anybody's ability.
Totally outstripped.
And so we have to interact with knowledgeable sources of information, and that some of that is informatics and computers, and some of that is other people. And I think and patients have to do that too in their care. So it's really, there's this revolution happening that nobody has really recognized, but it's already here.
Yes.
And I think patients need to expect to see a team of people, but then doctors need to learn how to depend on a team of people too, because you're going to be better at explaining medicine interactions and going through things in detail than I could ever do in my day.
And I will tell you that if there's, for whatever reason, and a pharmacist is not in that particular location that day, the phone starts ringing. What happened? We're so-and-so. And, whether they're, we have a pharmacist in the ICU. I mean, we're embedded in most, the service lines.
Are they embedding pharmacists in outpatient settings as well?
Yes, and that's part of our rotation with our residents in the outpatient. But we work very closely with the population health team. And so, I have pharmacists there. Tremendous amounts of data that you have to look at was what's the quality of this patient getting this expensive medication versus using a different rationale.
I was just going to raise that too, because cost never used to be an issue.
Right.
And now the cost of pharmaceuticals, of course, has gone through the roof. And you're not going to compromise somebody's health.
Never.
But if there's an equally efficacious way to treat that patient that is substantially less in cost, we want to do that. It leaves over more resources for everybody else.
And Eric, I've been in this profession for a long time. I'm shocked at what things cost.
Yeah.
I'm just, I can't, I continually just shake my head.
We should do a show on that at some point, because
let's plan that.
Because I agree, and I don't fully understand why the costs are going through the roof as they are, especially when it seems like drug companies are easily creating competitor drugs that are still name brand, but they're just like, they're changes in minor ways, and they can patent them as a different drug, and yet they all seem to remain high cost.
And so when we say that particular therapy is going to cost $10,000 a month, it doesn't even faze me anymore, because this is what we're dealing with in terms of drug costs.
But that just, it underlines emphasizes another role for the pharmacist.
Absolutely.
Because I can assure you doctors don't know the cost of these drugs.
Well,
because they don't deal with that as part of their life.
And they're the first to admit that. And so when you bring it up, they look at you and say, Bob, how could that be? Well, it is. And that's what we're dealing with. And
unfortunately, that's a worrisome note that we have to end this discussion on, but certainly something that we're going to have to contend with as a medical profession, as a profession of caring for people. This
we're far outstripping the ability to pay for things.
We can't continue to see escalation of drug costs, which are fabulous drugs. But we have run out of time, and that's very unfortunate. I really want to thank my guest, Bob Bepko, for joining me today on Health Talk, such a provocative discussion, and thank you for watching. Please remember to send us your questions and comments. Send them to healthtalk@newvancehealth.org. We'll see you next time. Remember, speak to your pharmacist. They can be an enormous source of valuable information for you.
We still have to slow the spread and do our part. Let's wear face masks in public. Stay 6 feet or more from others. Follow state and local guidelines. Wash our hands frequently and stay home when we feel safe. For ourselves, for our loved ones, for our future. Let's move forward together. Learn more at coronavirus.gov.
145 over 92.
180 over 111.
182 over 100.
and I had a heart attack and a cardiac arrest, and then a stroke.
Your blood pressure numbers could change your life.
A lot of people don't understand, including myself. I didn't, now I do, the impact of having a stroke.
My memory is shot.
When I woke up, I couldn't speak.
If I would have followed a treatment plan, I would not be in this situation.
It's a tough journey.
Lowering your high blood pressure could save you from a heart attack or stroke. If you've stopped your treatment plan, restart it or talk to your doctor about creating one that works better for you. Start taking the right steps at manageyourbp.org.
It's a new life, but I'm gonna make it better. Coming back. Ask your doctor, check your blood pressure.
If you're taking more than one prescription medication, you may be at risk for an adverse drug interaction. Today's Health Talk guest, a clinical pharmacist, will also discuss potentially dangerous interactions among prescription drugs, over-the-counter medications, and even food supplements. That's why it's so important to tell your doctor or doctors what medications and supplements you're taking. Watching today's Health Talk is important to your health and may save you from trouble. So stay tuned, we're up next. Hello, I'm Dr. Eric Mazur. Today we're going to talk about drug interactions, one of my favorite topics. My guest is Bob Bepko. Bob is the Administrative Director of Pharmacy Services with Nuvance Health and one of our most popular Health Talk guests. Bob, welcome to Health Talk.
Thank you.
I mean, this is not the first time we've talked about drug interactions, but it's always changing. There are always so many new drugs on the market. So what's the latest story? What are you seeing out there in the real world as some of the more common drug interactions that people may not be aware of?
Well, it's become a difficult process now because there are so many different medications that people are taking, and added on to, besides the oral meds we take that people, I should say, for cholesterol, hypertension, there's a whole new series of drugs that are called specialty pharmacy products, specialty pharmaceuticals that people are taking. It might be an injection once a month. It might be an injection 4 times a month for asthma.
At least some of the things we see ads for all the time on TV.
Yes, as a matter of fact, that's a very good point. You can sit there in the evening and you can find out what's all the new stuff that's on the market. And people, they're trying to get people to ask their physician to order things for them. But it's become very complicated now. All kidding aside, these specialty medications have to be followed differently. Matter of fact, I'm proud of our pharmacy in the lobby in Norwalk Hospital because they just received their URAC accreditation. They can dispense specialty pharmaceuticals now. It's a whole different thing. So they have to keep track of patients' lab values. They have to call them to see if they're still continuing to take their medication. Whole different system of parameters. And that interaction between the pharmacy team and the patient develops into a good relationship.
Well, given, again, the breadth of the medicines that are being approved with previously unheard of mechanisms of action.
That's the key.
I suspect the government is requiring more monitoring from what you've said of these drugs.
Exactly.
And so is that what the pharmacist is doing?
That's what the pharmacist is doing with these specialty products.
And they're saying a lot of them have a fairly brief approval, I shouldn't say, but are approved after a fairly short review because they're so important, so they have so much impact.
And they make dramatic turnarounds in people's lives. Whether it's the cancer drugs, which are critical.
The cancer drugs are
success.
amazing.
People are living longer now because of that. You have medications out there for, let's say, psoriasis, where when we were growing up, they used to, the physician would order 10% LCD in coal tar in Aquaphor. And people would spread this all over their bodies with the psoriasis, and it really didn't do much. It just made them sticky, you know. But now, you know, and psoriasis can be a debilitating disease, and yet now with the several medications that we have in this specialty line, dramatic turnaround of lives.
Point out, those are working through very complicated immune pathways.
Yes.
So this is, you know, although they are enormously effective, they really do have profound effects on your immune system.
They've got, it changes the whole dynamics of your immune system. That's why you've got to be careful. You need to take them at the right time. You need to let your physician know if there's any changes. You've got to keep the pharmacist involved with, because they're going to ask you, did you add anything? Did you go someplace else? Are you taking a food supplement? Are you taking, you know, an over-the-counter drug that you weren't taking before?
Maybe we could even just stop there for just a couple minutes, because I think there's a misconception in the public that because it's an over-the-counter drug, it's safe, or because if it's a food supplement, it's always safe.
No.
And I know that's not true. Do you want to just say a few words?
No, and it's whether, you know, we now know that people should not take more than 4 grams of acetaminophen, Tylenol a day now. Probably should keep it lower, closer to 3 grams a day.
Which is, again, I sort of amazing. As, first of all, they've moved to these extra strength
Everything's
Tylenol
extra
pills,
strength now.
which is 500 milligrams. I think people are used to taking 2 at a time, which is marginally better than 1. So that's a gram. You do that 3 times a day, you're getting near the threshold where you can poison your liver.
That is correct. And you're going to, for people, you know, your liver detoxifies everything that, you know, that you put in your body, and, you know, metabolizes it, breaks it into products that are not going to hurt the body. And, you know, if you're taking all this acetaminophen or Tylenol, you're interrupting things. And you know, it's not good.
But the patient at home, I think, is faced with a Hobson's choice almost. And I want you to tell me, how does the patient get through this? On one hand, if you look at any medicine, you see a laundry list of
side effects,
some of which are absolutely terrifying, including death. I mean, they even see it on TV,
right.
You know. So you've got this long list of side effects. Then you're taking multiple of these medicines, and you start to combine the list, and it becomes limiting. You just say, oh my God, I can't expose myself to that. And yet, we can give these drugs safely. So how do you reconcile the fact that, how does the patient reconcile the fact that the drugs seem so dangerous with their listing of side effects, and yet on the other hand, we do give them to people to treat them all the time?
It's, it does, anytime you're testing a product, when you're trying to bring it to market, it's part of the process. If somebody has an earache, that has to be listed. If somebody has muscle spasms, of course that has to be reported. And a lot of times it may not have anything to do with the drug. It might have been, you know, there were weekend basketball pickup game, and you know, they've got the muscle aches and pains. So everything's got to be reported for safety reasons. But it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's going to come down with something like that.
Yeah, if they did, the drug would never get approved.
Exactly.
I found actually sometimes it can be helpful. Some of the drugs will list side effects for the drug next to a similar group of patients getting a placebo.
That's great.
And sometimes you'll see that, you know, these terrible things, you know, heart attacks, you'll see 3% heart attacks in the placebo and 3% heart attacks in the drug.
Right.
And you realize that the drug had nothing to do with it.
Exactly.
But,
exactly.
But you can't really get that information for every drug.
No, it's just, it's overwhelming.
So how does the patient, what's the best way for the patient to keep track of these potential interactions and side effects? Again, it seems a little overwhelming, and you don't want to just play a passive role in your healthcare. You want to play an active role.
I think
the internet's out there. How do they handle all this?
Well, I'm saying the internet is a great tool, but it does not substitute for a medical degree. I want to stress that. Because I cannot believe how many people, I mean, I don't have a medical degree, I have a pharmacy degree. But people will come up to me and say, well, you know, this and that. I said, well, where'd you read that? Well, I read it on the internet. I said, listen, you need to talk to your physician, talk to your pharmacist, talk to an APRN, all right? Talk to them, okay? Everything on the internet is not appropriate. And so I think you have to, again, it all comes basic, which I believe it's your relationship that you have with your healthcare providers. You gotta have a relationship that you can talk to them and they can help set you straight.
And trust them.
Exactly,
You've got to have
trust them.
somebody that you believe has your interest at heart. And I think the vast majority of healthcare workers
course.
really
Otherwise
put the patient first. I know a lot of people don't think it's all money, it's all this, and there are bad apples in every group. But I think the majority of docs, the majority of the pharmacists, and all of us working in healthcare really want to do the right thing for people.
Listen, this is
in fact, you're devoted to that. You devote
exactly.
your career
this is
to
a
that.
24-hour a day, 7-day a week. Healthcare is a profession. It never stops. The demands have never been harder. You have dedicated people that are in this. They're there for your best interest. You got to develop a relationship. Ask them the question. They'll give you the answer, or if they don't know the answer, they'll send you to somebody that does. But it's critical.
And it's so important to speak to them, because if you think you're having a side effect or you think you're having an interaction, speak up. We have to know about it. And we can maybe reassure, you know, that's never really been reported, or that's anxiety, even though it did happen at the same time, that's really not consistent with what we know about that drug. Or we may say, you know, that could be, maybe we should modify things a little bit.
Exactly. Let's cut back the dose, or if we're not getting a result, we may up the dose a little bit.
You mentioned the Tylenol or acetaminophen overdose, which I've always been struck by, because it's really, not always, because we recently understand that, but especially it's almost impossible to buy the smaller tablets.
It's very difficult to find the 325 milligrams.
Which is what I would like to take
exactly.
when I have a headache. But are there other things that you're finding commonly out there, either side effects, I don't know, statins, or any, you know, some of the common drugs that are out there that people are having problems with or should be aware of?
I think, you know, classic, you mentioned the statins. Were great drug, has altered the course of cardiovascular disease. Some people always claim, well, it's bothering my muscles. I can't, you know, I can't move in that. I don't know how overblown that is. There's certainly some people.
I take a statin. I get at least one cramp a day, and you know what? I thank God for the cramp, because I don't have heart disease at age 71, and both my parents had heart disease when they were much younger. So, I mean, some of these side effects, they're real, but they're manageable.
But it's a good trade-off.
It's for me.
It's a good trade-off. So take the statin that your healthcare provider prescribed for you.
And a lot of people, we've got 30 seconds left, a lot of people are taking antidepressants, and I know that they interact across the range. You want to say a couple words about that?
Yes. If you're taking an antidepressant, why would you go and have a cocktail or a glass of wine, which is a depressant? And so if you're taking an antidepressant to help pick up your mood, why take something that's going to counteract that? And I use that as a classic thing all the time. Why take something to counteract it?
It's wise advice, and on that advice we have run out of time, Bob. We could go on like this for hours, and we have. We do this on the side too. Unfortunately, time's running out, and we need to wrap this up. Thank you, Bob, for joining me on Health Talk today. And please, at home, if you would email your questions and comments to us at healthtalk@newvancehealth.org. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching. Stay well, and ask the pharmacist if you have questions. Your doctor, they all work together, and virtually all of us have your interest at heart.